Welcome to the Feds, insiders bringing accountability, integrity, and reform to a broken bureaucracy. At Feds for Freedom, we value constructive dissent and healthy debate. The views and opinions shared in today's episode are those of the speaker alone and do not express the views or opinions of the U.S. government or any other employer.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Feds, where we are pursuing accountability for the illegal activity during COVID and protecting Americans from government overreach. I am Stephanie Weidel. Retaliation for refusing the nonsensical COVID protocols didn't stop once the mandates and policies were lifted. More people than you think within the federal government and military are still experiencing retaliatory measures. Today, we speak with a Feds for Freedom member in the State Department, Mark Pemberton. Before our conversation, really quickly, go to Twitter and start following our channel. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. Go ahead and check out our website where you can donate towards our mission and towards this podcast in particular at fedsforfreedom.org. Mark Pemberton is a State Department law enforcement officer who in 2020 refused to sign a pledge stating he would follow CDC guidance outside of work hours. He never guessed how that would be the beginning of adverse actions against him for the next 5 years. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really good to meet you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Mark, why don't you give us a sense of your background, ending with what job you held in 2020?
Sure. So I joined the State Department in 2015. Before that, I practiced law for a few years. I graduated law school from Liberty University in 2007 and then practiced private practice in the oil and gas industry until I joined the department. After that, I went through my basic special agent training and then worked in the New York field office for 2 years. Did quite a few TDYs around the world, got a lot of great experience there. After that, I moved to our Office of Mobile Security Deployments, and that's the State Department's, it's like our tactical and crisis response team made up of special agents. In a given time, there's 6 to 10 small units that then deploy around the world to assist with embassies, consulates that have a crisis going on, support the Secretary of Security details, things like that. Natural disasters, stuff like that.
Well, that's a major shift going from the legal realm to Department of State law enforcement. Why the switch?
I had an interest in serving the country. It was a great opportunity. Actually, interestingly, my younger brother is a foreign service officer as well. So now we have kind of a State Department bond, I guess, and we've gotten to run across each other various times during our career. So that's been fun. And it's just been a great way to serve, give back, and really kind of say thanks for the opportunity to live in this great country.
In 2020, where were you stationed?
So in 2020, I was stationed, posted, in basically the Washington, D.C. area as a part of this tactical team. So we were based there. We would do training in various locations. And then when needed, we would deploy out to different places around the world.
Okay, so in 2020, March, the whole world changed.
Yep.
And you were one of the first to be asked to do something you did not want to do. So would you go ahead and tell us about the document that you were asked to sign?
Yeah, that's right. So that's essentially where this whole thing started. There was just a kind of a series of events that all happened right about the same time. And but the first one that happened was in around April of 2020. As everybody remembers, everything shut down. We were essentially told, don't come into the office, go home, await further instructions. So we were all basically sheltering in place at home, working on our EERs and stuff like that. And then there was an opportunity. They said, hey, we have some seats and some driver training down in our Richmond area training facility. Totally voluntary. You don't have to do it, but if anybody wants to, we still got the spots. So I said, absolutely, I'll go down and train. It's better than sitting around. So I went, and as soon as I got down there, they said, we have this training pledge that you will all sign, condition upon your completing the training. So of course everybody just kind of signs it and doesn't really worry about reading it and moves on. Well, I actually read it. Like I said, I'm a former lawyer, so if I'm going to sign something, I'm going to read it carefully and make sure that I actually agree with it. And one provision of it said, among other things that were reasonable, we'll wash our hands 5 times a day and wear rubber gloves and stuff like that. Okay, that's fine. During work hours, I'll do whatever you want. But then it said, I pledge to comply with CDC guidance outside of work hours. And I don't know if you remember at that time, CDC guidance, in addition to constantly changing every other day, also said you can't gather in groups, to include something like going to a worship service or church. And first of all, I'm not going to waive my First Amendment rights. I'm not going to promise that I won't go to church. I'm not going to promise that I won't gather in a group or go see my family or things like that. And also, I'm not going to promise to do something that could change at any moment, because the CDC guidance tomorrow could be different than what it was today.
That's right.
So I, said respectfully, I'm not going to sign. It's okay. So, I immediately, the training facility immediately called my leadership back in the DC area, and I get a call. They say, what's going on? I said, well, I gave them my reason. I said, well, I wouldn't sign it. And I said, in addition to, I'm not comfortable with waiving my rights. I also feel this would be an integrity issue. I mean, to promise to do something that I'm not going to do, i.e., not go to church. And so they said, okay, well, come back. You can't do the training. You got to come back. So they pulled me out of training, went back. The next day I got called into the office, and the office leadership, kind of criticized me, said things like, everybody, we had 100 other people or however many people signed this. Everybody else did it. Why didn't you do it? We have to have everybody sign it. And I laid it out clearly. I think this would be an integrity violation to sign this. I mean, in addition, like, nobody's actually doing all these things that they're promising to do. And I specifically said this, for me, this is a religious issue, because this means, like, this would be saying that I'm not going to go to church, which I'm not going to do. So they didn't really do anything after that, I guess, counseling session. It wasn't necessarily like a formal discipline, but I think that really set the tone moving forward. And then there were multiple emails that went out to the whole office after that, saying things like, I expect everybody to sign this. If you don't sign this, you won't basically participate in the work. Specifically, don't wordsmith this document. Don't worry about everything that it says. Just do it. That kind of thing.
Wow. Did you ever find out if they were asked to provide 100% compliance?
I found out through some FOIA emails. There was, well, first of all, it just kind of went away. I never signed it. It just became overcome by events. I don't know, but I certainly never signed it. And I actually have emails from going back and forth from the management, saying, well, this isn't even mandatory, so why are we making him do it? That sort of thing. So it was not mandatory, whatever that means. It was not mandatory. They just wanted me to do it so that they could say that everybody in their office did it.
Very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was the very first sign that something was not right in the COVID response, that you were asked to sign this. They pushed back against your reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
But then the summer of 2020 happened, and you were pulled from that trip that you were asked to go on as a result of this, correct? Or was it as a result of testing?
So that was April, and then in July, my team was at the last minute basically assigned to do a trip, and we had like a few hours notice, maybe like a day's notice. We were told, show up at the medical office tomorrow, basically, for COVID testing.
Mm.
And I had some concern with that. Again, this is way back at the very beginning, so things were pretty crazy. There was reports that you hear in the news, someone tested positive and then they weren't allowed to leave their house, things like this. There was reports at the time that the DOD actually said if you'd ever tested positive for COVID, you couldn't join the military. I mean, things like that changed. Everything was in flux. But like my point was, and at the time, like there was, it was a significant deal. And, I'm thinking, well, these tests for this brand new thing have just, magically appeared. How do I know that this test is accurate? I'm not sick. I don't want to be tested now. There's really only a downside for me. If I take this test and it turns out that they say that I'm sick when I'm obviously perfectly healthy, like I don't know, I'm not really, I was concerned about the test is not, it's not FDA approved. How does this test from this company, how do I know that that's the same as this other test from this other company? What are the standards? So I told my direct supervisor, I said, I'm not comfortable taking this test. Same thing, alarm bells go off. I start getting phone calls. What do you mean you won't take the test? You have to. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take the test. So they immediately pulled me off the trip. Basically, within a matter of very shortly thereafter, they already had someone else to go on the trip to take my spot. And in fact, this is another interesting thing. So from, let's say, March, April to July, nobody had deployed anywhere. There's actually a little publicity piece from the office director saying, basically bragging about the fact that we were all sheltering in place. They'd canceled all our leave. Nobody could even leave the National Capital Region. There was no trip. No one was doing it. Everyone was just, no one was even training. Everyone was just itching to go do something. So when I was pulled from that trip, basically people were like fighting to take my spot to get to go on a trip, because that's what we all, that's why we're there. We all loved going on trips. And this was a high level trip and everybody wanted to do it. So obviously I was very disappointed that I wasn't able to be with my team and do the trip. But again, I kind of felt like this is not comfortable, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. And, here I am, 5 years later, but, yeah, so I got pulled from the trip, and interestingly, the particular test that they were using was the BioFire. It's the brand, the BioFire COVID-19 test. That's the main brand of the test. It was under an emergency use authorization, which specifically said that test was not to be used for asymptomatic testing. It was only to be used to confirm a diagnosis from a medical professional, which is 100% not what they were using it for. Also, obviously needed a prescription, which we obviously didn't have. Obviously had all kinds of documentation, informed consent and stuff like that, governed by the EUA that you were supposed to have access to or be given, and to include warnings for things like false positives and things like that, which was one of my main concerns. Of course, we didn't get any of that. They just said, show up, take the test, don't ask questions. Also, interestingly, at that time, there was a department cable guidance that had come out in June that specifically said the BioFire COVID-19 test is not to be used for asymptomatic administrative testing screening. This is exactly what they were doing. So this was even violating department policy. Also, that same cable said, if you're as part of your foreign service career job, you're supposed to go somewhere and you're not comfortable with the host nation's requirements for whether it's testing, quarantine, stuff like that, then you don't have to do it. You can request to change your assignment. Now, I obviously wasn't given any of those options. They just said, you have to do this. It's mandatory. It's required. If you don't do it, you're going to be punished. So as a result of that, I ended up getting, they said that they were going to give me a letter of reprimand, which is not the end of the world. That stays in your file for a year. You can obviously challenge it. You can grieve it. But I actually didn't get any of those options until actually 2024. So that's another one of these.
What do you mean options?
So with the formal disciplinary process for the department, or I'm sure other government agencies, there's a specific procedure they have to go through. So for a formal discipline to include a written reprimand, which is a reprimand that's written down, goes into your file, you have the option to challenge that and oppose it before it ever goes into your file. If and a written reprimand goes into your file and it stays there for 1 year, and then after that, it's removed from your file, and it's like it never happened, and you can go on with your career.
Wow. So you weren't given that option until 4 years later.
So 4 years later, and that's where I guess the plot thickens, because also about that time in April 2020, a fellow department employee had reported me to basically the insider threat program because of some Christian religious speech that I'd posted on my personal Instagram. And so this whole thing, after I was reported as essentially now an insider threat, this person, in her submission to Diplomatic Security, which is essentially my agency, she said that she had seen a right-wing Christian, who, quote, that's exactly what she said, that I was a right-wing Christian and I had posted white nationalism symbols. But what I had posted, was actually a traditional Christian symbol for the name Jesus Christ. It's very common, it's probably most common within a Roman Catholic tradition. It's also used in some Orthodox settings, as well as even some Protestant settings. It's very, very common. You'll see it in any Catholic church you walked into. You would see it immediately. And it also posted a prayer, which happened to be written in the Romanian language. Is the Jesus prayer, which is essentially the most sacred prayer in the Orthodox traditions. It'd be kind of similar to like a Roman Catholic rosary, or not as important, but maybe like second in importance to even like the Lord's Prayer. I mean, it's something that's very, very common, very sacred.
It absolutely blows my mind. I have not talked with too many people. I'm under 100 people on this podcast so far.
Mhm.
And I would say maybe 3 or 4 of them have been labeled insider threats. And what's interesting is I would think your case would have been rare, like looking on social media and people going after you and your official capacity based on your social media posts that are just furthering your religious leanings. And it's actually encouraging things. It's not chanting death to whatever, right? These
Yeah,
are encouraging principles, and yet you're being labeled an insider threat based on these good principles.
yeah, it's wild. I mean, the prayer is Lord Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. It's like it's a prayer of repentance. It's what like an Orthodox person would do in I guess in reverence or respect of the admonition to pray without ceasing. So you essentially say this thing. I mean, it's almost like a form of meditation. It's something that you do all day long to remind yourself of your humanity and your relation to God and what you should do as a human, and obviously to be in repentance all day. So yeah, it's just to have that be labeled white nationalism or white supremacy, extremism, and then this is where it gets really crazy because okay, maybe somebody saw that, was offended, whatever, but you would think that calmer heads would prevail when it gets to the point of, my colleagues, other federal agents, federally trained investigators would see this. They might have done a quick Wikipedia search or Google search, seen what this thing is, seen what this prayer means, see that it's been around for 1,500 years. But that's not what happened. They actually pursued criminal prosecution. They presented um, their case against me to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, National Terrorism Center, Domestic Terrorism Task Force. They actually presented what they were trying to have as a criminal case against me to the special U.S. attorney for human rights. Apparently, I had violated somebody's human rights by with this. So yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. And,
It's
th- and
I
there
mean,
was
it Go ahead.
so so this became this just basically insane investigation by Diplomatic Security's Office of Special Investigations, and they why the thing with my office with the test never got resolved is because OSI, Office of Special Investigations, then took that and brought it in, and now this is all being used to prove that I'm this bad guy. Um, and this is again where it gets really wild. So I was pulled up that initial trip. I was never given the option of like, hey, what are we going to do about your career if you're not willing to take these tests? Let's talk about it. It was, you're not going to be able to deploy. You can't work here. This is a big problem. So I eventually said, I can't remember, it was a week or two later, I said, okay, I will consent to take tests if they're required for deployments. And they said, okay, great. You're back. You're back. Everything's great. You're back on deployable status. It's like, but we're still going to give you this letter of reprimand. And I said, okay, go ahead, start the process, and then I'll respond accordingly. So I bring that up because within like a couple of weeks, then I get assigned to this extremely high profile, very sensitive, lots of international visibility trip. And it's like nothing ever happened. I go on the trip actually to augment another team who interestingly had someone who couldn't go. And successful mission. We got an award for the trip. Continued on for the next maybe year and a half or year of that assignment to go on multiple of the trips in leadership positions, again, sensitive trips, things like that. So, and I found out later then in 2024 that someone in MSD management had also reported me to the Insider Threat Program, specifically regarding my declination to take this one test in July of 2020. So my essentially office had also said that I was an insider threat, and yet continued to let me function in my position, deploy, maintain my law enforcement credentials, all that stuff. Meanwhile, OSI was in the process of trying to have me prosecuted as a terrorist, saying that I was somehow involved in racially or religiously motivated violent extremism because of my religious speech and stuff like that.
What do you make of someone labeled an extremist and then being allowed to deploy? It
Well,
doesn't make sense.
Exactly. It's obviously inconsistent, and it's clear that all this is a pretext, and that it was being my essentially COVID, I guess, COVID dogma resistance or non-compliance, or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, I was a member of Feds for Freedom since the beginning, was a member of some of these lawsuits, all of that stuff. So, I mean, obviously, I wasn't playing along. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, I basically took a stand and said no, or was put in a position where I had to do that way earlier than anybody else, because I knew that these things were going to happen. It was clear that this was only going to get worse. Since I was in that particular job position, we were still working, deploying all this stuff, while most of the rest of the department, a lot of other agencies were, essentially remote working, not really being put in those positions until later on down when the vaccine mandates came out. So yeah, I was just put in a position pretty early on, to where I took a stand. And then I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was your question again?
Well, what do you make of being like labeled a domestic extremist
Right. Yeah.
and then being allowed to deploy? And
Yeah.
that
So
label stuck with you for years after that, and they were still allowing you to go on these trips.
100%. Yeah, it's very inconsistent, and it just proves the pretext. So first of all, this other department employee, um, calls in and says that I'm an extremist, which is crazy, and clearly defamatory. I mean, I'm a federal law enforcement agent who is, devoted my career and put myself in harm's way to protect my colleagues and other Americans and other non-Americans from things like, violence and extremism and stuff like that. So then to say that I'm that obviously has huge implications for things like my clearance, my job, my professional reputation. So yeah, and that just snowballed and snowballed, to where now they're saying, yeah, I'm an insider threat because I didn't want to take a non-FDA approved medical procedure. And then you see what's happened lately with these revelations of people being labeled domestic violent extremists. I mean, I don't know if I'm involved in those lists. I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
Yeah, but then to have no implications on, obviously I was still completing my job, serving, successfully receiving awards. But it's had a huge effect on me because in addition to who knows how many people OSI went around and interviewed, I know I'm far behind my classmates as far as promotions. Um, is another thing to bring up, which is interesting. So I was selected for promotion in 2021. So this is directly based on my service in MSD to include reviews written by my supervisors there who there's never anything bad in any of my reviews, received good reviews, good work, was selected for promotion 2021. 2023, 2022, I was in language training and other training for the whole year. So that was not really a promotable year. Then 2023 and 2024, again, all three of those years I was selected for promotion. But each time the department refused to process that promotion because of the ongoing personnel action. So, and this ongoing personnel action is based on saying that I have, you know, basically OSI said that I was a violent extremist, and yet I'm still doing my job and getting selected for promotion based on my work. So it's obviously clearly inconsistent. And again, from 2020 when this first started, I had no ability to respond, no ability to give my side of the story, nothing until February 2024. I was actually serving overseas as an assistant regional security officer. And for, months at a time, the acting regional security officer. So the one security officer at various times, leading 150 other security, guards, Marines, investigators, everything, advising the ambassador, you name it. But yeah, I was, at that time in February 2024, Global Talent Management, finally contacted me and said, they've finally wrapped up this case and they want to suspend me for 6 days. So
No, they've wrapped up the case, meaning they've looked at all this evidence and they think you're still guilty?
the timeline is, so this starts in 2020. For about a year, OSI is investigating me, trying to do this criminal thing, which didn't work out. The DOJ obviously didn't want to have anything to do with it. So then they go after me administratively. In 2021, they complete their investigation, which includes, and this is their allegations. Obviously, this isn't reality, but they come up with certain allegations, and then they either substantiate, exonerate, or then there's like inconclusive or unsubstantiated. So they literally, I'm not making this up. They allegedly substantiated that I was associated with religiously motivated violent extremism, and that I had engaged in notoriously disgraceful conduct as part of the social media post. Part of which is where I had, it was essentially part of it was essentially a dating site where I had said that I was interested in finding a Christian woman to start a family with. And this is one of the most outrageous parts, is they literally said that my interest in starting a family was identical to the platform of a white supremacist group.
No.
Yeah. So they
And,
took
and
that.
for that, they would suspend you for 6 days?
Well, here's where it gets even crazier. That's what federal law enforcement agents concluded in their investigation, that posting religious symbols, very innocuous universal Christian symbols, and saying that I was interested in finding a Christian woman from kind of a similar background to myself to start a family with. They said that was notoriously disgraceful. Substantiated that. That's in their report. So then that gets passed on to essentially HR, we call Global Talent Management, and suitability as well. So at any point they could have said, this guy's a racial extremist. Clearly he shouldn't have a security clearance. They pull that. And then again, you're in, I'm frankly surprised that they didn't, based on what clearly that they were trying to do. So this goes into HR, and then HR proposes discipline. So, and then after that, then it goes to, and then you have it, and then finally you have a chance to respond to it. So in February 2024, so almost 4 years after this starts, finally the allegation, the reality of the allegations against me. I find out things like a fellow department employee had, said that I was a right-wing Christian, and that's what started all this. That my own office had reported me as an insider threat related to the test issue. That Office and Special Investigations had labeled me essentially a violent extremist, that they tried to criminally prosecute me, that they were calling my personal relationship and family, goals and preferences for what I want to do with my life on a personal level as notoriously disgraceful. I mean, it's just absolutely outrageous. So I find all that stuff out. And in 2024, the director of employee relations for GTM is the proposing official. She proposes a 6-day suspension. And that's extremely significant because a 5-day suspension or anything, 5 days or less, stays in your personnel file for a specific period of time. I'm not sure exactly what they all are, but maybe it stays in there for a written reprimand stays in for 1 year. Let's say a 3-day suspension, maybe that stays in for 2 or 3 years. Maybe a 5-day suspension stays in for 5 years, but a 6-day suspension specifically stays in your personnel file until your next promotion, which obviously is not going to happen because from then on, every promotion panel is going to see that you have a 6 days, so you have this disciplinary, essentially like conviction in your file. So that's one issue. The other issue is I've been promoted 3 times during this period. I've been selected for promotion based on my performance 3 times. So if they end up officially disciplining me 4 or 5 years later, I'm not going to get any of those promotions, and I probably won't ever be promoted again, ever. So the basis for this 6-day suspension was not on the fact that I was allegedly confirmed as a extremist. It was not for notoriously disgraceful behavior and my personal relationship goals. It was for the test issue, which should have been resolved by my office in a written reprimand in 2020. And had that been addressed then, had I had the chance to respond to it then, potentially agree, but whatever, let's say maximum, that would have been all resolved in a couple of years. Maximum. It would have gone out of my file and I would have been promoted. But I haven't even had a chance to respond to it until now. But not only that, she based this entire 6-day suspension on, I'm not even kidding, a selfie picture from a gym, from the weight room of a gym in 2018. And she said that was worthy of a 6 days. I mean, obviously pretext, completely pretextual, because you can't have someone who's been allegedly confirmed as an extremist and you're not punishing him for that, which probably GTM is smart enough to know that wasn't a winner, right? Like if they go on the record as that's probably not going to be a winner for them. So they have to find something.
Have you gone, especially to the initial supervisors, and asked? I mean, you're not being upfront. You are looking into my social media accounts to find dirt, what you would call dirt on me, like prayers. They would consider that dirt. Have you asked them, what are you doing? And I mean, how do you sleep at night?
Unfortunately, this is kind of the I don't know, it's just the nature of the beast, especially with this type of scenario. I mean, when you're being accused of these things that are obviously, horrible, embarrassing, completely damaging your career, ruining would easily ruin your reputation, all this stuff, you really put back on your heels. And that what they're trying to do is build a suitability case against you and say, well, maybe we can't find any, actual crime or misconduct or anything. But, if you're running around, being a white supremacist, you probably shouldn't have a clearance. That's the kind of thing that they're trying to do to you. So you're really just trying to say, hey, whoa, this is a misunderstanding. Like, you're really not trying to poke the bear because you know that they'll just do something else, which is clearly what was happening. So I guess to answer your question, for most of this time, I've been trying to honestly keep my head down, just do my job. And you're kind of hoping that this plays out and the calmer heads prevail and this just goes away. Someone sees it and realizes what a ridiculous scenario this is and resolves it. favorable way. So, for a long time, I didn't really feel like I was in a position to do that. The direct office director, who was the one who had criticized me back about the pledge and the test, he actually retired like within a week after that, after the testing issue. I think he's a contractor with the department now. And then the guy who was a deputy took over as the office director. And in my when I actually left that office, I did mention to him. I was like, hey, this is I'm kind of surprised why there's all this stuff being thrown at me, but yet I'm still doing my job, and what's going on. And I'm a little bit disappointed that you guys didn't try to deal with this on a more personal level, or what's going on. And he claimed to not know what was going on. He told me to my face that the former director was working on my case with the OSI director, who's also retired. So I know that there was stuff going back and forth between them. I know that this office director, had issues with me, based on nothing I had personally against him. Just, unfortunately, I was put in some positions where I had to, what I thought was stand up for what was right, and he didn't like that. And of course, I found out through FOIA emails that, this subsequent office director didn't know what was going on, and there were statements, email. I'm not sure who sent them, but there were, they all knew what was going on. So that was a little bit disappointing as well. Yeah.
So the biggest question we all have is, what is the best way to bring about accountability for these wrongs, and specific accountability for these specific instances?
Yeah. I mean, on a personal level, I'd say, I mean, absolute bare minimum. Um, at some at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, I need to be, my 2021 promotion needs to be retroactively, um, processed with back pay and interest, um, stuff like that. I mean, I've missed out on assignments. I missed out on, obviously, professional development. Clearly, everybody wonders why I'm still a FS4 when I have colleagues. I have people in my cohort already being promoted and looked at for their twos. I mean, I'm years behind. I should have been promoted to FS3 in 2021 based on the merits of my performance and the promotion board's judgment. So I'm 4 years past that, and I'm still a 4. So obviously, lots of money. I'm only eligible for certain job um, positions based on that. People clearly, have questions. I know people have asked, why are you still a 4? You've been in 10 years. So this has been going on for half of my career now. So this has been going on for 5 years. I've been an agent for 10 years. So to answer your question, I mean, those are like personal things. I mean, I've got $10,000-$15,000 in legal fees at this point, stuff like that, as well as, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours of my own time, which I wish I could bill for that, at an attorney's billable rate. I'll never get that back. But as far as like institutionally, as I mentioned earlier, I've tried to keep my head down, just keep doing my job, and hopefully this, justice prevails. Also, for a while there, it was a very extremely hostile environment. I mean, I'm sure every COVID resistor list, et cetera. So you just know at some point the other shoe's going to drop, and what else are they going to use against you? So it's been refreshing, I guess, to see some efforts being made, executive orders on eradicating anti-Christian bias and things like that. I hope something moves forward with some of those steps that are being taken.
Yes.
Great. And it's not just Christians, right? I mean, no one should be discriminated against for their religion, or if the things were happening to me and I was of some other, if you want, ethnicity, religion, political, like whatever, it would still be just as wrong.
Yes.
But I think part of what's been, and again, this kind of a really hostile situation has been with this DEIA, really aggressive DEIA scenario. I just kind of found myself like raising my hand and saying, "Hey, does this apply to me? What about me?" And
Yes.
and it's like, well, I'm a, you know, white male Christian heterosexual guy trying to live my life, and I'm being called a white supremacist because of those things, and like, So obviously the inclusion and stuff like that didn't apply to everybody, and I hope moving forward that it does apply to everybody as it should.
Good.
Yeah. So I don't know how those things happen. Another thing is, and this happened through COVID too, was just seeing like the rank and file be really kind of in my mind abused, and see the responsibility and the risk and everything being pushed down to us. If people had issues with whether it's COVID mandates or whatever, we were fighting that on the absolute ground level, and saw virtually, that I'm aware of, no support from anybody in management or supervisory levels, recognizing our concerns, and trying to, whether that's help us or at least give us a fair hearing. So I saw that from my office, diplomatic security overall, Office of Special Investigations, Insider Threat, DS Executive Directorate, DSHR, Global Talent Management. All of these offices had contact with my case, and nobody said, "Hey, this is not right. This guy's being abused. This guy's being harassed. Why is it okay to criticize this guy's Christian religious speech and call him these defamatory, horrible things?" And I never. That's, I guess, I'm not sure how that gets fixed, but that's a pretty big institutional issue in my mind.
Do you regret the stance that you took?
No, and I certainly would have done. And honestly, frankly, I wish I would have um, stood up for myself more and fought harder from the beginning and let the chips fall. You're really trying to. I know we were all just trying to do our jobs, whether this is COVID or many of, and lots of people have similar stories with OSI, actually with the actual specific case agent that was involved in my particular case. But that's another issue. I've heard a lot of stories like this, and you hear them all the time. But you're just trying to do your job, and hopefully you'll be vindicated. But I also learned that that's not necessarily the way to go about it. So I wish I would have. You're trying to keep your job, and a lot of times, you're trying to like not cause. You're trying to do what's right, but still stay employed. So yeah, I wish I would have probably fought harder earlier. I don't know that anything would have been different, but it certainly couldn't have hurt anything. Because I mean, given the position I'm in right now, 5 years later, still with the 6-day suspension hanging over my head, is um, you know maybe it might have been better to just cut ties a long time ago, than to have to deal with this for 5 years. Honestly.
Mm. Well, if the average American citizen could do one thing to combat the corruption that they see in our country today, what would it be?
I would say just again, I mean, I guess to go back and answer your question, no, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't have done anything less. I wish I would have done more. Um, but I think the average American, yeah, cannot be, just don't be afraid. I mean, we saw this throughout COVID. The pressure would get ramped up, and at different levels, different people met their point of where they, I guess, I mean, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but couldn't take the pressure. Um, and that's unfortunate. Different people are in different life situations, and I get that, but I guess just be willing to say no. Honestly, I mean, um, sometimes that can be the best thing, and also hold whatever you can to hold people accountable. And this goes both ways, both sides of the political spectrum. If the laws aren't being followed, as the procedures aren't being followed, like I get it. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of stress. It takes a lot of money. And some people have the ability to do that. Other people don't. Thanks to yourself, everybody in Feds for Freedom. I mean, Marcus, obviously, all the the original, the OGs out there fighting the good fight. Like, we can never say thanks enough for all that. But like, some people were willing to stand up, and it worked for the most part. So um, I guess that's one thing is, when you find whatever it is where you need to fight and stand, like, do it, because it may not always work out how you want it to, but at least you'll have your integrity. At least you'll have your honor. Like Marcus always says, honor first. So I feel like I got put in that position really early on, and I've kind of been in slightly different scenario than a lot of other people, but we were all essentially in it together too, on various issues. So yeah, I guess just when you find your hill to fight on, like, do it. It's worth it.
Those are excellent words, Mark. Thank you so much for standing strong and for never giving up. And I know it came at great personal sacrifice. Thank you for what you have done for the freedoms of this country.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do and everybody else at Feds. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe to, and share our podcasts. I'll see you next week.